Bula, and welcome to this week's episode of Green Pillars. Last week we started with our horticulture series with a visit to the incredible South Sea Orchids in Nadi. SSO owner Mrs. Aileen Burness shared with us a little history on their works and how she and her late husband Don actually started what is now considered the largest orchid company in the country.
South Sea Orchids is our original company. We registered it as South Sea Orchids Limited, and we're members of PIFON, Pacific Island Farmers Association Network. We're one of the founding members. They started their first meeting, the founding meeting was here, and then that's how all the farmers are getting together.
In 1996, they started an Outgrower Programme and began running workshops for growers both locally and regionally, promoting best growing and harvesting practices. As a result, a wholesale market for florists to buy cut orchids and anthurium flowers was also established.
The workshops we normally have, Don and he's trained Stephen and he's trained Levi so that they could take over from him. And Stephen now does the workshops, but normally Don does it. And Stephen used to be there with him and helps, but I'm there to make sure that everything is in place, and I sort of make sure that everything goes. But the training is that what we normally do is make sure that the women know how to do things properly, how to grow their plants properly, and how to be just a farmer and not want to be everything. You know, like be a farmer, sell their flowers and get their money. And then we have florists, where we supply the florist and the florist buy from us wholesale, and then they make their money because they've got to pay for the ribbon, all the bits and pieces to go with the florist. But they have a way of, so we have different people earning money.
We were lucky to get a private tour of the historic Burness family home, packed with artifacts hundreds of years old in pristine condition and with so much history preserved. Took us on a tour of the gardens outside and even shared some tips on how to take care of your orchids.
But yeah, with these vandas you get a whole range of colors. You got your yellows, your reds, pinks, purples, whites, just a large range of colors with your vandas. The hanging orchids up here, all strap leaf vandas, and then a whole bunch of other landscape plants that we keep inside the nursery.
So what are we doing tomorrow?
Okay, so tomorrow we'll go, we'll start the workshop early. And then basically we're just going to go through all of the orchids that we have here in Fiji. All right, and then we'll talk a little bit about each one of them and how you look after them. We'll touch a little bit on anthuriums and gosmanias as well. But basically, yeah, everything to cover from fertilizing, watering, shade, insecticides and fungicides if you have to, things like that. Yeah.
Cool, so that's bright and early tomorrow?
Bright and early tomorrow.
Thanks for getting me to wake up really early. Okay.
With these workshops, anyone that comes to the workshop, they're eligible to buy from FSA 20 plants each, no more than 20, but they can buy 1 or 2 or whatever they want. And what they do is they can take those plants and they can sell them when they flower, or they can grow them in their nursery. They can do what they want with it as long as they make something with it, you know, to make a living. And a lot of the growers already have bought them and sold them. And as long as they let us know so that we can make sure that it's monitored and we know where it's going, you know, like that sort of thing. So far I think we've done 13 workshops. We've also done most of them here, you know, here, because everything is around us here. So people that come to the workshop here, they can see what they're going to learn, what it's all about. So they can actually see it growing, they know what they're doing wrong, they learn how to use the fertilizers, They know, all those bits and pieces, things that they never knew before. They're learning with this workshop. It's a mini one, but it's something that we're doing.
To start with the orchids, I guess it's best to start with the dendrobium orchid, which we're going to be talking about. All right, so now this is your dendrobium orchid, the main type that you see for cut flowers. All right, you usually see them out in the market. Now, all different types of colors now we have it here in Fiji. Now there are mainly two types of way that orchids will grow. Okay, so one type is like the dendrobium, which is called sympodial growth, which means it creeps along the ground, or it will keep creeping, or monopodial growth, which means it will grow up something, and it keeps growing up. Okay, there are only two ways that the orchid will grow. Okay, and those are the two ways, and it becomes very important when you're going to repot and divide. Okay, now talking about the dendrobium orchid. Now this one here, or actually I'll go through this piece of paper that all of you should have in front of you. Okay, and basically I'll go through in order with the piece of paper. So with watering, now I'll talk about the different types of orchids with their different types of watering that you need to give them. So the dendrobium orchid, which we're talking about, now ideally you would want to water them every morning. Okay, so these types here, you would want to give them every morning, and if it is dry and hot, mid-misting in the afternoon, if you can. Okay, so basically for all orchids, the rule is you don't want them wet overnight. So keep away from watering in the late evening. All right? So every morning, if you can water them, that would be best. Sometimes we don't get to water all of our orchids, and they will do fine, these ones, for up to a week to 2 weeks without water. Okay? They won't thrive, but they will survive. Okay? They can go for almost a month without water. Okay? These ones here, you can see that they've got these pseudobulbs. Okay? So they got some sort of water storage. Whereas when you come to this type of orchid, which is called a vanda, all right? These ones don't have any pseudobulbs, no way to store the water, so these ones you need to try and water every day if you can. Now when you are watering your orchid plant, all your orchid plants, I forgot to mention, you water the whole thing, not just the roots, not just the bottom. Okay, so all epiphytic plants, they've adapted over the years to take in all their nutrients from the leaves, the stem, and the roots. Okay, so when you are watering, you water everything, the whole thing. Right, there's another type of orchid we have here, which a lot of people in Fiji don't have much luck with. It's called Phalaenopsis orchid. Okay, very thick, fleshy leaves. Usually you see these in the movies. Okay, a lot of people use them for their offices. Now, these ones here, usually why people don't have much luck with them is because people do water them in the afternoon. Usually they'll have fungal growth, and that's why a lot of people don't have much luck with the Phalaenopsis. All right. Then you have another one here, which is called a Cattleya orchid. All right, looks very similar to the Phalaenopsis sometimes with the large, thick leaves. Okay. So those are your four main different types that I'll be talking about. Okay, the dendrobium orchid, Phalaenopsis, the Cattleya, and your vanda orchids. Okay, those are the four different types of orchids we'll be talking about. All right, now with all of them, like I said, this one can go for a couple of weeks without water. This one needs water every day. Now with watering with these two, it's best to keep for your Phalaenopsis and Cattleyas if you can control your watering. Okay, so what I mean by that is that you will only have them watered in the mornings. Okay, never in the evenings. Those ones you might be able to get away with watering in the evening, but these ones here, they will definitely die, usually if you water in the evenings. Shade is very important for orchids. Okay, it's important to have the perfect balance between light and your shade. All right, now, talking about the dendrobium orchids, now these ones require 50% shade. If you can give them perfect 50% shade, this is what they want. All right, now, if you want to try and mimic that, basically they can have early morning sunlight, and then you have to shade them from the harsh midday sunlight, okay, during the midday, and then they can get that afternoon sunlight as well, from 3 o'clock till sunset. Okay, so basically from about 11 o'clock till about 2 o'clock, you want to shade the orchid from that harsh sunlight. All right. You will notice signs of burning if you take an orchid right from a shaded area straight out into the full sun. Okay, they will burn, they will turn yellow and eventually lose all their leaves. Okay, and then on the other side, if you're going to give them too much shade, they do look healthy, dark green leaves, very fast growth, but you won't get any flowers.
Coming up next.
Okay, that's for your dendrobium. For these vandas, it becomes a bit complicated. Now, like I told you, there's all different types of vandas. You have the skinny leaf ones, you have the medium ones, and then you have a very large leaf one.
Today we're at the South Sea Orchid Growers Forum and the last one for this year.
Okay, now the basic rule with all orchids is you look at the leaf structure and you'll know how much shade it requires. Okay, so the rule is the thinner the leaf, the more sunlight, and the thicker the leaf, the more shade it requires. Okay, so this one here, this Terete vanda, you'll see a lot of these grown in the full sun. Okay, a lot of people put them on the coconut trees and out on the balambala. They do fine, no signs of burning. Whereas if you put something like this out into full sun, you'll lose it within 1 day. Okay, so that's the rule. The thinner the leaf, the more sunlight. The thicker the leaf, the more shade it requires. A lot of the times people will say, you know, my plant never grows. I mean, it grows, but it never flowers. I give it so much fertilizer, but it's just all to do with the light, the amount of light that you have. Okay, ventilation, very, very important. Mainly just because of fungal disease. Okay, like I said, orchids don't like to sit wet overnight. Okay, that's when you start having your problems of fungal diseases. And so that's why we say ventilation is very important. Okay, keep your nursery clear. Now, I've told people if they do have a shade house, if you do have a shade house, try and keep your surroundings clear of shrubs, or if you do have high shrubs, keep them low. You know, if you have big trees, if you can transplant it, you know, or do a heavy pruning on your plants. Okay, because already your shade house has 50% shade. If it's a 50% shade, you don't need added shade onto that. Okay, and then it just stops wind flow, and then you'll have these problems, fungal diseases. Moving on to media, the types of media that you're using. Okay, so for all our orchids, our dendrobium orchids, we use this blue crushed metal. Okay, just your normal gravel. It's a 20 mm blue crushed metal, and the reason we use this is, the first reason is because it's very good with its drainage, okay? And anything that we need for orchids is just good drainage. So we can use this. There's also some people who use coconut husk. Okay, coconut husk is another one. But the added benefit of the gravel is also because you can use it for your entire life. All right, it's very economical. Once you're finished with the plant, okay, it's done. You need to repot. You can just take out that gravel and then wash it again and then use it again on your next plant. Okay, so that's why we use this 20 mm crushed metal. A lot of people will ask, can we use the river gravel? You can use the river gravel, but it is quite smooth, a lot of that gravel, and it tends to sort of clump together, and you don't get these jagged edges, yeah, where you can have a lot of drainage. Another media, like I said, is our coconut husk. Okay? Now, we used to get our coconut husk from agro marketing, but they no longer sell the coconut husk. Now, why we were buying coconut husk from agro marketing is because they actually took off the hard husk for us and just gave us this fiber, basically. And that's what you really want, just this fiber. You don't really want that hard husk Okay. The tip with using coconut husk though, if you are going to use it, you have to treat it. Okay, and when I say treat it, you basically just have to drain it. Okay, you have to soak it and drain it for a couple of weeks if you can. Okay, because there are a lot of tannins in the coconut husk. Okay, and you have to get out all of that salt and all of those tannins, and then you can use this coconut husk. Okay, we usually use the coconut husk for our anthuriums. And there's a massive difference between using the fresh coconut husk and the washed one. Okay, it's massive. The unwashed one will be stunted, while the other one just flourishes. Okay, so there's a big difference whether if you wash your coconut husk or if you don't wash your coconut husk. All right, now the third media that we use here at the farm is rice husk. Okay, now this is a lot harder to get for us on this side. Okay, we have to get it from Vanua level. That's where we get our rice husk from. And this is also another perfect media for anthuriums and gazmanias. All right? It's quite expensive when it gets here. It's like $5-6 a bag, all right, for a sack. But it is one of the best media. So if we had to choose between the coconut husk and the rice husk for your anthuriums, we would say to use the rice husk. Okay? In the beginning, we used to use just pure rice husk, but now we've actually added a little bit of manure into the rice husk to just give it an added boost of fertilizer. Okay, we've been using pig manure, and I think it's over a year or 2 years it's been composted. Okay, so and we'll only use the ratio of about 1:4, so 4 shovels of the rice husk to 1 pig manure. We use usually for our anthuriums and our gazmanias. We've noticed a lot of burning on plants when we use chicken manure. A lot of you would have seen, or maybe you have some of these plants, a lot of these terete vandas. Some of them are purple, and then we have our the yellow orchids, which some people call spider orchids or tiger orchids. Okay, a lot of you might be familiar with those. So a lot of people wonder why theirs is not flowering so well. A big part of that we've noticed is that with vandas, they don't flower until they've reached the top of whatever they're growing on, and then they'll flower. All right, so a lot of people, we've noticed that they put them on very large balambalas, okay? And really they won't flower until they've reached the top of that balambala, and then they'll flower, okay? So yeah, you'll notice a lot of these on coconut trees and things like that. Okay, so yeah, it's not going to flower until it reaches the very top of that coconut tree, and then it's going to flower. So what we do here is we actually trick the plants, and we have shortened stakes, and we grow them on the short stakes, and then they're ready to flower. Okay, so if you notice when we go on our tour around the garden, we'll show you what we've done here. We've made little stakes, and then they basically flower straight away.
Coming up next, more on the Orchid Growers Forum with Stephen.
If you are in the flower business, you can't really be in the bee business. All right? Moving on to the gazmanias or bromeliads. Now, the bromeliads is quite a large family. Huh? Now, bromeliad, pineapple belongs to the bromeliad family. Now, we brought in gazmanias, which belongs to the bromeliad family. Now, the only added, apart from their flowers, which are beautiful, the added benefit of gazmanias is that they don't have thorns like most other bromeliads. Okay, so you can use them in your gardens, in your home, and they're not going to prick you. All right? Whereas you have these other bromeliads, which also look very nice, but they have very sharp thorns on the side. Okay? Now with the bromeliads, they're very easy. Very, very easy. You leave them outside, and you hardly have to look after them. Watering is easy as long as water is in the axil of the leaves. Okay, they're fine. So you don't have to worry too much about watering, just as long as you notice that there's water in the axil of the leaves, they're fine. Hardly they have any diseases or any pests come onto them. The only pests that might come onto them are mealybugs. But yeah, easy as long as you have very loose, I wouldn't say soil, it's also rice husks mixed in with a little bit of manure. Okay, so all of the plants that we're dealing here with today are true epiphytic plants. Okay, so basically they can grow on trees, they can grow on rocks, and so with all the media that we use, we try and just replicate that. The roots have a lot of air to breathe. They'll be fine in the garden. Now Gazmanias, they require an 80% shade. Okay, so you have to make sure that they're in a very shaded area. This one here has been left in a little bit of too much sunlight. You can notice that's burning now. Okay, so you will notice burning if you put them in more than 80% shade. With our anthurium, same media, rice husk with pig manure. And Levi will go through dividing this one as well a little bit later. But anthuriums also are in the 80% shade range. Okay, so they need a lot of shade and a lot of water. So that's why you will notice that hardly in the west we have a lot of anthuriums. Okay, it's mainly on the silver side that they do really well. Okay, they require a lot of water. We ideally want to try and water the anthuriums twice a day. If you can, twice a day. A lot of the times, some bromeliads, because I'm not sure if it's a Gazmania or not, but some bromeliads don't flower. Okay? A lot of bromeliads are just grown for their leaves. They don't actually flower. Okay? Or if they do flower, it's very insignificant. It's nothing amazing. You know, it's right inside and, you know, just to reproduce. But not all of them will produce an amazing flower coming out. Okay, not all the time. But if you notice, I just brought. So if you do have trouble and you're not sure whether it flowers or not, you can try and use this. Okay, this is the pineapple hormone that people use to induce the flowers for the pineapples. Okay, so you try and get the pineapples off season. So because they are the same family, you can use this pineapple hormone and put it in the middle. I think you can follow the instructions on the label. You just use a couple of drops, I think, in the middle of the axil of the leaves. Okay, and that will induce the flowering. Now, if you notice your anthuriums, and if you want to try and replicate that same color, maybe you love that color and replicate the same color, or if you want to try and cross-pollinate, and get a different color, all you have to do is basically look at the proper flower here. Okay? The spadix part, the middle part of the anthurium. Now, when you notice that spadix, the middle part, changes color 3/4 way, okay, usually as it matures, that's a good example. The color's matured and it's matured and it's gone 3/4 way up. That's the time that you want to pollinate your flower. Okay, and basically all you'll do is run your fingers from the bottom of it to the top. Okay, this is a very small one, but usually you have larger anthuriums, and you'll run your fingers from the bottom to the top. And basically you're just taking the pollen to the stigma of the flower. All right, and that pollinates it. Then you wait a couple of weeks, and then you'll notice that they start to have little bubbles on the spadix, okay? Sometimes ants do it naturally. And then you just let that bubble mature over time. And then when it gets large enough, it's sort of like a little seed inside with a jelly covering. And then it should be easy enough to just pick off. And you pick off all those the bubbles. And you put them on a newspaper. You squish the jelly. And you let the seeds dry, and then after a couple of days, when the seeds are dry, you'll put them into a wet medium, okay? And usually we'll say to put it in something like a sphagnum moss. You know what sphagnum moss is, or what they call in Fijian toinda or sphagnum moss? Anything that just keeps its moisture. Or if you can keep shredded coconut husk very moist over time, just for it to germinate. So that's how you can germinate your anthurium seeds if you want to. If you want to replicate that plant or if you want to cross-pollinate. And if you want to cross-pollinate, basically you're just going to run your fingers and then go to the next plant, the next plant, the next plant.
Join us next week for part 2 of the Orchid Growers Forum at South Sea Orchids. We learn about fertilizers.
With your orchids, fertilizing is a very big part. If you want your orchids to grow healthy and to get the best out of your plants, okay? More flowers, healthy green growth.
And insecticides and fungicides.
Another insect that you might have is a red spider mite. Very important about insecticides and fungicides. We don't really want to use insecticides and fungicides.
All that and more on the next episode. We'll see you then.